I'm pretty sure I cannot die to physical damage in maps. It's glorious. I wonder if I can, like,
Leap
300%.
Slap is
300%
useful for
attack damage is kind of big. I'll just leap all over the place.
Stampede leaves
If they have a... This guy's not going to have a pack, so you just drop the hammer on him. And he'll go down. Just bleed out. This one's a little more surrounded. We can probably just work right here. And he'll bleed out. And then if everything else fails, you just keep jumping on there if you want.
Come here.
Standard map clear, you're just bouncing from pack to pack. If you want a little extra clear, you can start popping bodies. We're pretty much just hopping around looking for rares. Nearly invincible. Unless you stand in 5 AoE elementals. It's okay on Breach. It's not like my favorite thing on Breach. But to be honest, I don't really care for Breach anyways. I spent all day yesterday. I've done quite a bit of Breach, but I've been preferring Expedition. I spent all day yesterday doing like 90% quantity Breach. It was 200% rarity, running a Temporal's fucking insta-kill build, and I swear, Breach is just not as good as Expedition. Like, not even close in my opinion. Alright, the bleed, evasion, block, Warcry, explode, leap slam warrior. I want to talk a bit about the issues with it first before I get into the gearing and the passive tree. There's going to be a mobalytics guide, so if you're somebody that doesn't like listen to somebody talk, you can go check that out. The warnings I'd give about it, first and foremost, I don't make melee builds ever. This is the first one I've ever made myself, and I think aside from this, I played like a Flicker Strike build for 5 minutes and then gave it up because my head was about to explode. Normally when I'm making a character, I draw inspiration, even if a character like from a class that I'm really familiar with, like I'm insanely good at minion builds, and if I go to make a minion build, I'll still like look around and see what else is out there. But with this guy, I just went in totally blind. This is just 100% my creation, so very likely I overlooked quite a few things, and this could be done better. Single target damage is a problem. Not really a problem. I mean, you saw me kill the boss in that little intro clip. It's not like the worst ever, but if you go to fight some of the higher end bosses in this game, you're gonna need to know the fights. We'll just say that. It's not like 30 million a second or anything. At best, it might be, I don't know, a million DPS or something like that. It's not crazy for bossing. So outside of like a league start situation, I would probably just use this as a secondary character. At best, if you just really like the warrior meta and you want to leap around like I did. Aside from that, I think the rarity is a little tough to scale. I was able to get 152% rarity, which is perfect. That's what I'm aiming for on every character, but that's also with an ingenuity belt. If I take off the ingenuity belt, I'm at 104%, which is okay. I actually wouldn't mind playing with this at all, but I had the belt, so I threw it on. The reason it's a little tough to get is because the strength requirement is just so insane on this guy, that being able to equip your weapon is, you got to get strength on every single piece. So that means that your rarity needs to land on your prefix for the most part, unless you can find, you know, something cool like this and still be able to balance your resistances pretty well. I was able to get everything up. The chaos I could only get to like 60% without the ingenuity. And the evasion goes up to it'll go up to about 80% when you're in a map, due to this guy right here. Once you get hit, your evasion skyrockets. So yeah, it's not going to be a boss killer. It's really just for mapping. And lastly, the other warning I would give about it is I make a ton of random ass builds, but I don't make a ton of build guides. So if you're like a newer player with very, very little understanding of the game, or how to maybe problem solve if a build doesn't like lead you perfectly in the way you need to go, then this might not be great for you, because while I will add as much detail as I can, I'm not gonna, it's not gonna be like an insanely well done guide. It's gonna be kind of just a basic overview of the character. But with those negatives out of the way, we'll get into the strengths. It's basically unkillable in maps, with the exception of standing directly in like 4 AoE spells or whatever. You're pretty much not going to die, especially to physical damage. I took this here. I was actually just experimenting with this. I think this is better. I misunderstood this when I initially read it. I thought every time you got hit, it procced the Jade, but the Jade is actually an active. So for the most part, this just stays stacked up at 10%. So it's just a straight 10% physical damage reduction. And then if you want to, you can pop the Jade. And I don't have any stacks. Oh, there you go. It just like makes your character immobile, and you take a bunch of reduced damage. I think it's like 6k at 10 stacks. I don't ever use the active. I think if you could move and use it, then like that would be cool. It would be super cool actually. But with your character being immobile, it's kind of bait. Like half the stuff still kills you anyways, so it's pretty stupid. But as far as just a straight 10% damage reduction, it's awesome. Break armor. Whenever I go to do a boss, I switch these around. I put those two up there, and so I go brutality and heft up into the earth shatter, and I bring close combat down, and then I just stack up a bunch of earth shatters. And whenever the boss comes out, I break his armor, and then I drop the hammer, and that should bring him down to like 20% usually, just through the bleeds alone. So you just like throw a couple more and then shatter him, and he's usually dead. I did a buying guide on my last video or 2 videos ago, something like that, where I built this guy for 2 divines, and he totally works with that budget if that's more of what you're around. The only reason I had to spend 30 was because I wanted to add rarity, and it all started with adding attack speed just to get him to feel a little smoother. I put attack speed on the gloves, which killed 40% resistance, and so I had to basically rebuy every item to refill that gap with resistance, and I figured, well, I was going to do that. I might as well get rarity too, but on the rings, you're just looking for chaos resistance, other resistance, strength on every single piece, and rarity if you can afford it. Which honestly, I think this is like 1 divine. This might have been like 2 or 3. They're not that insane. On your boots, as much movement speed as you can get. Life, strength again, strength on every single piece. And then, you know, whatever resistances you need to balance out. I think the attack speed is really nice, although it might not be that mandatory. I've tried scaling this like attack speed like crazy. I even tried to buy a one-handed weapon to see if that would work, as far as just like smoothing out the clearing experience. And I swear it was like I did X amount of attacks for 10 seconds with a two-handed and X with a one-handed that was like twice the speed, and I got like half an attack more out of the one-handed weapon. So I don't think attack speed is like all that insane with the animations. I think the animations in this game just kind of suck. Like, that's pretty much what you got. Yeah, life, rarity, strength, and dex. You need to get dex here and there to be able to fit your evasion chest. I ended up getting reduced attributes on this. I think it helped quite a bit in bringing down the evasion cost and just helping with gearing. I think it's a really wanted stat for this build. So make sure you pick something up with that. And then 45 spirit is what I was aiming for. Strength, dex, resists again. Shield, 8% physical damage reduction, pretty big. Resistant health. I put my block chance up to 44%. If you're struggling to find a shield like this, I also misread this ascendancy here. It gained 40% base chance to block from equipped shield instead of the shield's value. So you can get any shield basically, and then if you remove the Jade and go into this, it'll become base 40% block. Like if I were to put this on right now, it would actually make the shield worse because it's 44%. And then for your weapon, I'm using a 923 DPS weapon. It's a pretty fat weapon. Most of the weapons I saw were about 40 divines for this. But I just put up an active search one day and played with it on the side of my screen, and after a couple hours, this one popped up for 15 divine, so I picked it up. But I was using a 740 DPS weapon, and I felt like I could go into Leap Slam at that point. Before then, I was using Earth Shatter, but once you get around 700, 750, then you can start one-shotting most mobs with Leap Slam. So that's what I'd be aiming for if you're on a budget. And the other important thing about the weapon is the strength requirement. This is like the highest end I would go, and this actually made it pretty tough to gear for. Because of this, I had to put an extra point into equipment, and skill gems have 4% reduced attribute requirements. But you can get the same stat, reduced attribute requirements, on your weapon. So if you can find a huge DPS weapon with that stat, then you might be able to get rid of this entire thing, depending on your dexterity and how much dexterity you get. But aside from that, I have Lasting Trauma anointed. I don't want this to be anointed. I just need 3 more skill points to get into it, but it's such a big skill that, or big passive, that I wanted to go into it. Ideally, I would like to try this out to see if it'll make my Leap Slam go a little bit quicker. And if not, then I will go into this to make me far tankier. Either of these anoints would be ideal. And then for the jewels, we are just using Perfect Bleeds, 7% chance to bleed, and Magnitude of Bleeds, with either gain 1 rage on melee hit or gain rage when hit. And then that pairs pretty well with your Berserk, which is increasing your rage by 58%. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Not much more to it. If you can get accuracy on your gear, you might be able to come out of this. This pretty much solves your accuracy completely. You can almost 100% hit on evasive maps just because your accuracy is so big from your strength. But if you can find accuracy on your gear, you can maybe go into attack speed instead. I just don't have any accuracy on my gear, so that didn't work out for me. These nodes are really big for scaling your chance to bleed. I think they end up being like, I don't know, 8 or 9% each. Once you get over, once you get into like the 75%, 80, 90% area. So those are really big. You can save a lot of points on your chance to bleed with those. And then yeah, other than that, you're just scaling attack damage and magnitude of bleeds. You could go into Resolute Technique. Like you cut these 4 points out, and it's exactly 4 points to get over into Resolute Technique. The only reason I didn't do this is because it cuts your damage down by about 10%. So I didn't feel like doing that. But you will miss like 1 in 10 hits on evasive maps. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I'm not entirely sure. But evasive maps and evasive monsters, you'll miss here and there with this. But if you were to go into this, then that wouldn't be the case anymore. So it's up to you. I prefer the 10% damage, and I just don't really run evasive maps that often. But your call. Are able to get the duration of the bleed up to 6.27 seconds, which is pretty solid. Like I said, you pretty much just hit anything and it'll die pretty soon. But if it's like a boss and it's going to be alive a little longer, then once the bleed is over 4 seconds, as soon as you hit it again, it aggravates it. So it's doing double damage if you don't aggravate it. Just does 100% extra damage as if the target's moving. But one of the cool things is since you're leaping around, as soon as you leap on something, you leap again, and that thing starts to chase you. So that creates a aggravated bleeding since it's now moving while following you. So pretty much everything's always aggravated. If you have any questions about the build, feel free to comment. Anyone who asks a question that I don't include in my guide, I'll try and include it in my guide after I respond to them. Yeah, not much more to it. Just sort of a fun punch him in the face kind of build. If you have a warrior laying around. I do think there's a lot of potential with this bleed. I mean, this is kind of just like almost a bit of a meme build that ended up working out kind of decent. But I could see a ton of potential with a harder hitting ability, like maybe a bow ability or a crossbow ability, using bleed. I don't think crossbows hit that hard, but something can probably hit harder than leaf slam with a bit better, with a little bit more smoothness to it. But yeah, it's pretty cool for now. Definitely a build to keep in mind for the future when some other abilities and weapons come out.